Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming out. All right, it works. Yay. All right, my name's Amy Leask, and I am a philosopher. This is usually where I pause for laughter. People point, people stare. Okay. Yes, I studied it at school twice. I taught it for a long time, and I write about it. And a lot of people give me funny looks when I say I'm a philosopher. I'm in philosophy. And I think maybe it's because a lot of people think of a philosopher as somebody like this guy. And I don't look like that guy. Not on a good day, anyway. So they think of philosophers as these people in togas from 3,000 years ago with long gray beards that they play with as they think of, mysteries of the universe, mysteries of human nature. Okay? Philosophy is old school in the sense that it's been around for a long time. And questions like, what makes a human being? How do we relate to each other? How do we relate to the rest of the universe? How does it all fit together? They take time to answer. So yes, it's old school. It has to be. But I am a resident of the internet, which isn't that new anymore. Social media, mobile apps, that kind of thing. So, true to form for a philosopher, I'm going to start with a metaphor. We like doing comparisons, you'll have to bear with me. And I'm going to borrow from a great philosopher, Mary Midgley, who's from the UK and who just turned 93, which does not bode well for me as a philosopher. I was hoping to retire, and it's never going to happen. So I want to talk about philosophy and plumbing and how they're similar. Okay. According to Mary Midgley, both philosophy and plumbing are these very intricate, complicated systems, all kinds of little bits sort of melded together in a very particular way. It takes a little bit of skill to put it together. So as you can see from the pipes there, that's kind of what philosophy is like, all these little intersections, all these little theories stuck together. And it's constantly being updated, improved, built upon, changed, repaired, replaced, that sort of thing. Okay? What else is similar about philosophy and plumbing? Well, according to Mary, plumbing, where is plumbing? It's in the walls. It's under the floorboards. We don't think about it very often. We take it for granted that every time we turn on the faucet, it's just going to work. And I don't know very many people who know how to fix their own plumbing either. So there's that similarity with philosophy, that we kind of assume, in most cases, that it's just there. It was 3,000 years ago, Plato did it, it's done. Just tuck it in the walls and assume that it's already there, it's already finished, it's working. Now, I don't know how many of you have had a pipe burst in your house or a flood in your basement, but when that happens, when your plumbing isn't working, you want someone in really quickly. You call in an expert, you call in a professional. And you don't take it for granted anymore that your plumbing isn't working. Okay. Mary Midgley says the same thing about philosophy. We take it for granted that the plumbing of our society, the plumbing of the way we think as a culture, is just working. We don't think about it very much. I don't need to do philosophy. Well, when the pipe bursts, and we're going to talk about some of the little leaks that happen with new technology, you want to call someone in. And I think we can call everybody in. And that's one of the things I want to talk about today, that everyone can contribute to this. So let's talk about this a little bit. Okay, this isn't social media, it's not the internet. But as I mentioned before, I used to teach philosophy. And one of the things I would talk about with my students is how these new technologies would affect the way people lived, our daily lives, our habits, as well as the way we thought. How our worldview would be changed by these pieces of technology. Okay, and something that would come up quite often, we'd talk about fire, we'd talk about the invention of the wheel, jump ahead a couple millennia or more to the printing press, and then we'd usually get to microwaves. It was something that everybody had in their home, it was something they used every day, but how did this technology change the way that people thought and people lived? The way it changed people lived was pretty straightforward. And I would get students who'd say, it makes my life easier because I can do things faster. I don't have to cook as much. I can just stick something in there, push a button, I'm done. I can get on with other things. So speed, efficiency, convenience, that came up with this new technology. But then I would poke them a little bit more. I would say, okay, how does this change the way you think? How does this change the way you feel as a human being? The way you relate to other people, the way you see yourself in the world? And I would get this. Okay, you get a lot of that when you're a philosopher, like that. So I would dig a little bit, I'd prod a little bit, tell me more. And I would get things like, well, the microwave changes the way I relate to my family. I don't have to sit down with my family anymore for dinner. I can just push a button, I can eat whenever I want. So maybe the microwave has changed the way we relate to the people that we're related to. Okay, that's one way. Another thing that would come up was gender roles. You know, any domestic device that you throw in there is bound to question, you know, who's in the kitchen most of the time, who's doing the work where. So that wasn't a surprise. So I prod a little further, and I'd get other answers too. The microwave has changed the way we think about food aesthetically. It's no longer a big deal to have beautiful food. You know, it's no longer a big deal to express ourselves through foods. It's all about speed and convenience. Another thing we would talk about was our ethical relationship to food and how the microwave had changed that. Okay, we're already produce our food from the animals that give our food, from the plants that give us food. Did the microwave space us out even more? Do we think even less about where our food comes from and who has to do what to get it? So that's what I got from microwaves from my students. Now you can imagine what I got when we talked about the internet and social media and web stuff and app development. Okay. Here's one thing my students would say when I asked, what changes have been made in the way you live and the way you think because of new media, because of new communication technology, because of new information technology? And this is a pretty standard answer. It makes it faster and easier for me to find lots of facts and information. And I don't want to debate that. Obviously, it has. Okay, let me put up a slide here. Just a little bit of information about how much. I don't know what this amount of information does to a human brain, but we'll leave that for another day. So 16.5 hours on average, and this is mostly people under 30 that are included in this data. And you're kind of thinking, well, how do you spare 16.5 hours out of your day to be on the internet, to be on your phone, to be watching television, that sort of thing? It's not all one at a time. You know, people they multitask. So people will be watching television. 5 hours is combined, doing things at the same time. And what that translates into is 2.6 terabytes every year of information that the average person under 30 in Canada gets. That's huge, okay? And as you can see, 332 DVDs, 650,000 pictures. That's a lot of information. And yes, it has grown, okay? That is something that's changed because of all these new technologies that have come about. But what about quality, okay? And what about, I'll go back, the idea of facts? When you say the word facts, a philosopher gets a little bit queasy. They've always been a problem for philosophers. And I wanted to put up a quote from an old philosopher from quite some time ago. All generous minds have a horror of what are commonly called facts. They are the brute beasts of the intellect. And this is Thomas Hobbes, who died in the mid-1600s. So philosophers have been questioning the quality of facts for quite some time. For hundreds of years, for thousands of years, really. So what can philosophy do to help us wade through, and I'll go back to the plumbing metaphor again here, help us unclog the pipes? We've got a lot of information coming down the pipe now that we didn't have before. It's coming faster, in greater numbers, with greater ease. What does a philosopher do? What does philosophical thinking do to help us sort of control the flow of information in the pipes? Well, whoops. A philosopher, basically their job is to analyze facts, to question the idea of facts in the first place. Are they useful? Are they true? Are they harmful? So we have that as a contribution. And this is one way that philosophy can help us sort of wade through the plumbing of this new technology. So another thing that my students would tell me when I asked, you know, what does this new technology do? How does it change the way you think and the way you live? Is they say, I can voice my opinion whenever I want and people will hear it. Great. As a philosopher, I'm thrilled that people are getting their ideas out there, that they're communicating, that there's an exchange of information and viewpoints. That's amazing. But what constitutes an opinion in 2012 with all this new technology, this new media that's coming out? Okay, this is an opinion, all right? You can like something, you can follow something, you can favorite something, you can share it, you can retweet it. And all of those things just take the click of a mouse or the press of a button. You can do it on your phone, okay? If you're feeling very verbose, if you really want to get chatty, you could write a little comment, but even comments, in 2012 are usually quite short. And what worries me is that they're unsupported, okay? All of these types of opinions, they're all well and good, and I'm glad that people have the opportunity to like stuff, that it isn't just up to one select group of people to like and to tell us what to like anymore. But this is a one-way conversation. I don't even know if you can call it a conversation, when you just like something without saying why you like it, what's great about it, what's useful about it, okay? So what can philosophy do about this? What can a philosopher do about this? Well, again, here we're going back to the pipes. All kinds of opinions going down the pipes. We can start to filter it. And there's two things a philosopher can do to help this idea of opinions, this onslaught of opinions. Number one, a philosopher can demand that people say why they think the way they think. We can start asking more of other people who put their opinions out there through these new technologies, through new media. Okay? Why do you think that way? Is it a good reason to think that way? And we can demand it of ourselves as well. I'm thrilled that people can hear me. A good part of my career has been because people could hear me online, on apps, that sort of thing. But I'm really happy that I can also explain why I think the way I do. And philosophy demands this of people. Now, there's one more comment that I want to talk about that my students would give quite often, and it's the most exciting. Okay, we'll talk about this. Here's a little quote from Marshall McLuhan. A point of view that can be a dangerous luxury when substituted for insight and understanding. And Marshall McLuhan is not only Canadian, yay, but also predicted the internet decades before it ever showed up. So one last comment that I want to show from my students. These new technologies, it connects me to people all over the world. Hallelujah. That's fantastic. Philosophers, in addition to having this stigma as being, toga-wearing, beard-sporting, just people who sit around and think all day. In addition to that, we have this reputation for being very solitary. And there are philosophers throughout history who haven't really helped with this stereotype. Descartes, I don't know if anyone's ever read his meditations, but he talks about staring at a ball of wax with his windows shut, for weeks at a time, trying to figure out the nature of reality. Okay, so philosophers have this reputation for being very solitary, for locking themselves in a room, for navel gaze. Yeah, you're all smiling. You've heard this. Okay. Any philosopher in 2012 will tell you that the best philosophy, the most amazing ideas, the best exchange of ideas comes when you put a group of people together in something that we like to call a community of inquiry. And that's a really big term in philosophy right now. And what a community of inquiry is basically a bunch of thinkers who throw an idea out into the middle of the circle and they take it apart. They play with it. They analyze it. They break it into pieces. They suggest alternatives. They put it back together. They keep talking about it. Okay? And this excites me, the idea that there can be communities out there doing philosophy with this new technology. So are there communities out there already? Well, I did some research into online gaming, and the stats varied a little bit, but some of the studies showed that up to 1 billion people worldwide are involved in online gaming. We've already got a community there. That's amazing, okay? And I imagine they do it hours at a time. I imagine they spend, days constructing an avatar, getting a name for themselves, throwing things at other people, that sort of thing. So there's a community there. In Canada, we have 74% of the adult population with a cell phone, with a mobile phone. That's a great community. That's an amazing community already there. So this excites me. The idea that we can get together, that we can put our heads together online through apps with our mobile devices and think about stuff. Can you imagine if we had 1 billion people working on bioethics? If we had 1 billion people, and everyday people, working on environmental ethics, if we had 1 billion people working on what it means to be human, how we relate to each other, how we relate to the rest of the universe, that's an incredible community of inquiry. And it could be facilitated by these new technologies. And this is one way these new technologies can do philosophy a favor. I talked about philosophy doing technology a favor by unclogging the pipes, keeping the plumbing running, that sort of thing. Now, what excites me most about this is that you don't have to be an academic philosopher to do this. Okay? I'm looking out into an audience today, and I bet most of you have some sort of device on you right now. Most of you have some sort of plan. You're connected already. So all you need for this are people who are connected. And then you need people who are willing to talk about big ideas, who are willing to talk about what it means to be human, how we relate to each other, how we relate to the world. And you don't even have to be an adult to do it. Children do philosophy and can do it online. They do it in seniors' homes. They do it in prisons for inmates. So I want to challenge everyone today to go home, pick up your mobile device, and think about how you could become a philosopher through this technology, how you could contribute to this community of inquiry. I want to thank everyone for letting me come out here and speak today, and I hope to see you all online.